They always say the worst nightmares don't start as nightmares. They begin as small, unexplainable moments, little fractures in reality that go unnoticed until it's too late. This story started with a woman named Lena Carter. When Lena woke up that morning, she knew everything was wrong. Lena sat up in bed, her heart pounding. The sheets smelled unfamiliar. It was musky, almost cologne-heavy. The room was different, the dark walls, a massive TV mounted on the wall, sneakers scattered on the floor. Her hands, they were bigger, rougher. She threw the blanket off and nearly screamed. Her legs were hairy, her arms veined and muscular. And then, the worst part, she reached for the mirror across the room, but a man stared back. My hairs, my eyes, what is happening to me? Lena screamed, but the man staring back, she had never seen him before in her life, and yet he was her. Lena stumbled backward, her breath ragged, her chest felt flat, heavy. Her voice was deep, Lena in a man's voice. What the hell? She pressed a trembling hand to her face, tracing the unfamiliar jawline. The reflection did the same, but it wasn't her. She spun around, searching for answers. Something, anything to make this make sense. The nightstand held a driver's license. The name read, Daniel Hayes, not Lena Carter. Her stomach lurched. She grabbed a phone off the dresser, wasn't hers. Still, she dialed the number she knew by heart, her own. The ringtone played. A shiver ran down her spine as someone picked up. A voice spoke. I was waiting for you to call. Lena's grip tightened on the phone. The voice on the other end was hers. Her voice, Lena whispering, panicked. Who is this? You already know, don't you? Lena's breath came in sharp gasps. This wasn't possible. The voice on the phone continued. You're in his body. I'm in yours. Lena's world tilted. She gripped the phone, desperate. You can't just, I can. And I did. The line went dead. And in that moment, Lena realized something chilling. Whoever was in her body wasn't just pretending. They were comfortable, like they had been waiting for this, like they had done this before. Lena stood there, phone still clutched in her shaking hands. The call had ended, but the ringing in her ears hadn't. She needed proof, something real. Her eyes darted around the room. It's Daniel Hayes' room. There were men's clothes in the closet, a wallet on the desk, a framed photo of Daniel with a group of friends she had never seen before. Then a knock at the door. Hey, you okay in there? Lena's heart jumped into her throat. The voice sounded worried, yet gentle and familiar, to Daniel, not her. You didn't come back to bed. Lena's stomach twisted. Whoever she was, she thought Lena was Daniel. She had two choices: open the door and pretend or run. Lena bolted. She shoved open the window, the cold night air hitting her like a slap. The apartment was on the 3rd floor, but she didn't care. With shaking hands, she climbed onto the fire escape, her heart hammering. Then a voice behind her. Daniel, what the hell are you doing? Lena turned, breath caught in her throat. The woman stood in the doorway, fear flashing across her face. Lena opened her mouth to explain, to plead. Then the woman's expression shifted, from confusion to something else, something cold, something that made Lena's blood run ice cold. She stepped closer, grinning, eerily knowing. You figured it out, didn't you? Lena froze. The way the woman looked at her, it wasn't just concern. It was recognition. Lena hesitant and whispering. What? She smiled slightly. You think you're the first? Lena's pulse skyrocketed. The woman stepped closer, her voice eerily gentle. You're not Daniel, and she's not you. But believe me, you belong here now. Lena took a step back, her mind racing. This wasn't random. This was planned. And the worst part? Daniel might not be the only one. Lena didn't think. She jumped. The fall was brutal, 3 stories down, landing hard in a pile of trash bags that barely cushioned the impact. Pain shot through her ribs, but she didn't stop. She scrambled up and ran. Behind her, the woman's voice echoed down the alley. Run all you want. It won't change anything. Lena's mind raced. The woman knew. She had said others had switched before. How deep did this go? Who else was trapped in the wrong body? And more importantly, who had done this to her? Lena ran until her lungs burned. She found herself at a small, all-night diner. Dimly lit, barely anyone inside. A place to think. She grabbed a booth in the back, hands shaking as she reached for the phone in her pocket. Daniel's phone. She needed to call someone. Anyone. But before she could dial, a voice spoke from across the booth. Lena Carter. It was an unfamiliar voice. Her blood ran cold. She looked up. A man sat across from her, must be in his mid-40s. Sharp suit, dark eyes that didn't blink enough. She had never seen him before. But he knew her name. He kept looking at her like he had been waiting for her to show up. Lena's fingers tightened around the phone. "Who are you?" He smirked. "I know you better than you do." Lena wanted to get up, run again, but something about the way he spoke, it froze her in place. He leaned forward. "They didn't tell you, did they? That this," he gestured at her, "wasn't an accident? Who did this?" Lena asked. "Now that is the wrong question." The man pulled something from his pocket and slid it across the table. It was a key. "The right question is, how do you stop it?" Lena's breath hitched. For the first time since this nightmare started, she had a lead. Lena stared at the key. It was small, metallic, worn from use. No markings, no indication of what it opened. She looked up at the man, her pulse pounding. "What does this open?" He smiled faintly and said, "A door. The right one." He leaned back, watching her too closely. "But I should warn you, some doors? They don't just let you out. They let other things in." Lena's grabbed the key. She didn't have time for cryptic warnings. She shoved the key into her pocket and stood. "If you know what's happening to me, why don't you just fix it?" "I have tried," he replied. Lena wasn't convinced. There was something in his eyes. Something that told her he wasn't on her side. The address led her to an abandoned office building. Dust-covered glass doors. Faded, condemned sign. There was no lights, no movement, but the key fit perfectly into the rusted basement lock. The second she turned it, everything changed. The air shifted. The hallway stretched, twisting like a funhouse mirror. Then footsteps. She turned just as someone stepped out of the shadows. Lena gasped. It was her, or rather her body, her real body, standing just a few feet away. But the woman inside it, she wasn't panicking. She wasn't confused. She was smiling. Lena's breath caught in her throat. Her own voice spoke back at her. "You shouldn't have come here." Lena's pulse spiked. "What did you do?" Lena asked. "What I had to." Then the lights flickered. A force yanked Lena forward. The air felt thick and electric. And suddenly, she was falling. Lena fell deep into the pit. But when Lena opened her eyes, she was back in her own bed, in her own room and her body. She let out a shaky breath. Lena whispering to herself, "Was it all a dream?" Then she glanced at her bedside table, and her stomach dropped, because sitting there was the key, and next to it was a note. It says, "Intruder, you are mine now."